Right, so just to carry on from my little video about getting cheaper equipment, going through my old photos and I found these ones, and this was shot on a Canon 30D, so I'm going to have a look at this image here. Now as it opens up you can see down here Canon 30D, and the lens was a 55 to 200mm, so it's a cheap lens as well. So let's just see what sort of picture we can get from this. So with the white balance, it's looking a little bit red. I'm just going to try auto first and see what happens. It's a little bit blue. Just going to bring the temperature up slightly. Exposure's not too bad. I might bring a little bit more out. And then just pump a little bit of contrast into it. So it's not looking too bad at all. There's no sort of blown out highlights really. So what I'm going to do now is just open it into Photoshop. So remember, it was a cheap camera. I think it cost me about £65, and the lens was probably about 70 I think when I bought it new. So let's have a look at this picture. Just going to zoom into the eyes. So they're not too bad, they're a little bit soft, but what can be expected from that sort of lens is pretty good. So Control and J to copy that layer. Going to brighten up the whites, so screen, and then Alt click on the layer mask. Select the brush tool, just making sure that white is the foreground, flows at 100%. Using the bracket key to make it a bit smaller, and then I'm just going to paint over the whites of the eyes. And the same on the opposite eye. And then X to change the foreground colour to black, and then just painting back over the eyelids. Zoom out and then reduce the opacity, try about 19 to 20% again. And have a look at those two. That looks pretty good. Then Control Shift Alt E to clone it, hide the background layer, Control Shift and E to merge those two layers. I like to keep the background layer as I'm going, just so I can keep reverting back to seeing what I started with. Now I'm going to do the irises, so Control and J. Blend mode will go screen again, Alt click on the layer mask, zoom in. Select the brush tool, X to make the foreground colour white, make the brush a little bit smaller, and then painting over the coloured part. Just trying to leave that darker ring on the outer side there, and then a bit smaller here, and do the same on the opposite eye. And then zoom out, and we'll have a look at that. Pretty bright, going to reduce it to about 50%, see where we're at with that. That's better. And then Control E, merge those. Then I'm going to sharpen the eyes a little bit. So Control J, and then zoom in. Then I'm going to select the sharpen tool, strength at 20%, and then just paint over the irises on both sides. Then change the blend mode to luminosity. Let's have a quick look. You probably won't see any difference on this. Yep, that's pretty good. And then Control and E. Then Control and J again. Change the blend mode to multiply. Alt click on the layer mask. Select the brush tool again. Make it a little bit bigger, and then I'm just going to paint over the eyelids to give them some more definition. And then zoom out. Crazy. And then reduce it to about 19%. Or 18 in this case. So that's pretty good. Nice little bit of definition there. Control and E. Have a look at the original. So really started to bring the eyes out nicely with that. Right, the next thing we're going to do is maybe have a look at the complexion. So we'll just copy that layer, zoom in, and we'll have a look. So complexion's pretty good. There's not really much work needs doing on that. Just going to select the spot healing brush, make it a little bit bigger than the blemishes we're working with. So I'm not going to go too mad, just a few little touch-ups. That's looking pretty good. Doesn't really need a lot of work on this. Okay, then we'll zoom out and have a look at before and after. So it's minimal again. There's kind of two ways you can go with this. You can just leave it as natural as you want, or you can go really over the top, and I'll have a look at that in another video about how I've progressed or regressed depending on how you look at it. So I think what I'm going to do on this one now is go to curves layer, select the hand tool, find a brightish area, and then just pull it up. Then Control and I to invert that mask, select the brush tool, reduce the flow to about 3%, and make sure white is the foreground colour, make the brush a bit bigger, paint over the eyes and around the lips. So a quick look at those, and then double click on that layer. So we're onto the layer style. So now I'm going to do the blend if down the bottom. So Alt, hold the Alt key, that splits that cursor, then bring it across, and then that blends it in quite nicely. Just going to check with the preview, that's good, click OK. Then another curves layer, select the hand tool, find a darker area, bring it down, and then Control and I to invert that. Brush tool, white is foreground. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on this one, and I'm going to work on the eyes again. So I'm just going to make these a little bit darker around the eyelids, and just do both sides, so that should draw a bit more attention to the eyes. Let's have a look, and just zoom out and have a look. It's pretty good. And then what I'm going to do is shift click on those two, put them into their own group, and then I'm going to shift Alt, Control and E, so that's coming on nicely. Then I am going to do another curves layer, and I'm going to work on the highlights areas, so just finding that bright area, pulling up the curve to make it nice and bright. Control and I, select the brush tool, white's foreground about 3%. It's going to paint a little bit over the nose, bringing it up into the forehead region, a little bit over the eyes, just to attract a bit more attention to the eyes, and a little bit over the cheeks. And let's have a look at that. And then double click on the layer, get the layer style, Alt click on the cursor, bring it across just to blend it in. I think that's pretty good. Have a look at that. It's nice. And then we'll do one for the darker areas. Bringing it down. Control and I, select the brush tool, and then we're going to do a bit of sculpting, so a little bit across the nose on both sides. Eyebrows, we'll do inside the lips, and maybe a little bit over the top, underneath, around there, the nostrils, around that part. Let's have a look how that's going. That's pretty good. I don't think I really need to work on the cheekbones because she's got quite good cheekbones already. And then shift click on those two, put them into their own layer or group, sorry. And then Control Shift E. So that's looking pretty good. Next thing we'll do is work on the hair, again using the curves adjustment. Select the hand tool, nice bright area, bring it up so we can start to see a lot of definition in the hair. Control and I, brush tool, white's foreground, about 3%, and then it's going to paint over some of this just to bring a bit of highlight into the area. Let's have a look. That's pretty good. Double click on it. Try again. Come in. And then Alt click on the underlying layer. So I don't need to blend it too much on this. That's okay. That's pretty good. Control Shift and E on that. So it's looking pretty nice. Might be a bit of a red cast to it. The first thing I like to do is just try the vibrance just to bring that down slightly. And we'll have a look. So that's took quite a bit of the redness out. There's lots of other ways of doing things. There's not one correct way in Photoshop. There's lots of things you can do. So what I'm going to do now is select the brush tool, bring the flow back up to 100%, and then it's going to paint back in over the eyes. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit, and then make sure the foreground colour is black. Bracket key to make the brush a bit smaller, and then just paint over those to bring the colour back in. Zoom out. So again, it's minimal. And from start to there, it's looking pretty good. Other things we could do like quite a high key kind of thing. So if we go curves, bring the curves level up, and then if we go hue saturation, reduce the saturation, change that blend mode to soft light, and then reduce the opacity. So where we're at now, and then we can bring some more detail back into the hair. Solid colour, and we'll select sort of like a darkish, purplish thing. Change blend mode on that to difference, or was it exclusion? That'll be the one. And then again, reduce the opacity quite considerably, and then we can add another curves adjustment layer, put a pointer in the center, bring the darkness down a bit and the brightness up a little bit, and if we shift click on all those, put them into their own group, we can have a look at it. So that's looking okay-ish. So all from a Canon 30D for 65 quid. It's looking pretty nice. So what I'll do is Control Shift and E, and we'll have a look at the original to there in a few minutes. And I'll merge those two down, and then the way I like to sharpen it is to go into the channels, especially with female models, select the red channel and then filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, same before, 120% amount, radius 1 pixel, threshold 0, click OK, back onto the RGB, and then that's it, done.